Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It's a pleasure to once again bring together Sipurei Ameno, the stories of our people, and to sit here with beloved colleagues that will introduce themselves in a moment. I am Rabbi Nico Socolovsky from Temple Beth Tikvah, and I am sitting with...
I am Rabbi Nancy Myers. I've been at Temple Beth David in Westminster, and this is my 18th year at my synagogue.
Wow, 18 years. Yes, it's a serious number.
I'm still alive. Hi.
And I'm Rafael Fisher from Young Israel of Orange County, based in Irvine. And I only have about 16 years in Orange County, but I'm moving up on 2 decades.
Yeah, fair.
In fact, our shul was founded on February 29 of 2000. In order to have a date we would remember. So the good news is that we rarely forget it when the day comes, and the bad news is we usually don't even have our birthday. February.
You should switch into the Hebrew calendar.
I know.
You should go by the Yom Huledet Ivri, by the Hebrew birthday.
Absolutely, we still have to probably remember which Adar it was. Adar.
Correct. That's another layer of complication.
Leaps and bounds.
At some point, I must recognize that at some point I wanted to go by the Hebrew calendar in most of our simchas. And I didn't manage. I wasn't able to fully switch into the Hebrew calendar for our family simchas. I follow the Hebrew calendar as a part of my calendar, but I was never able to immersively enter the Hebrew calendar for our family celebrations. It's an interesting thing how we hold for our people celebrations. The Hebrew calendar, and some many of our personal celebrations, they go by the year calendar. So Parashat Ki Tisa, Haverim, shall we talk about it?
May as well.
So we continue with the narrative of the building of the Mishkan, and the children of Israel are invited, are called to contribute half of a shekel. And the contributions will be counted. And there are 2 interesting things that emerge from this idea. One is why the contributions are counted and not the children of Israel. There is an entire conversation about not counting Jews. And the other one has to do with bringing contributions in order to create something for which we have buying. An additional layer to that is that it's not a whole contribution, it's half. It's machatzit shekel. It's half contribution. Understanding that we can't build the Mishkan in its wholeness, in its entirety, alone. And we need everybody's contributions. And that my contribution is not a whole, it is rather a whole when we bring it together.
I love that, Rabbi Socolovsky, the idea that, well, first of all, that you
Nancy, Rabbi Myers, you need to know something. If you call me Rabbi Socolovsky, nobody will know who you're talking to.
So I say Rabbi Nico?
Nico, yeah, Rabbi Nico. You can...
Rabbi Fisher. Okay.
Rabbi, whatever you like, Rabbi.
Or Rabbi Nico, but the idea that you needed everyone to help participate in the building Mishkan, I love that, the Chetzi Shekel. They actually, in Pikudei, as a direct result of the census, that's how they come up with the 603,550 Israelite males over the age of 20 with this. The significant part, at least for me, is that it's a low amount that anyone can pay. no matter, regardless of if you're rich or poor. This very small amount that everyone can contribute and do their part and feel like I'm a part of this. So I may not be a big macher, I may not be someone who can contribute a bowl for the offering. I may, maybe I can't even do a pigeon, but we can all, at least of the Israelite males, can contribute that chetzi shekel, that half a shekel, to feel part and equal in our community.
So in whatever side you are, right? You cannot be, so if you are the poor person in the community, so you make a contribution, but also if you are the big donor, in this case, your contribution is limited. So this idea of equality is clear for all of us. It belongs to all of us. The community doesn't belong only to the big donors, also to the small donors. And in this case, we are all equal donors.
In the same way that the tribes each bring identical gifts at the time of the Chanukah Bayit. And so that the sense of equality, nobody outshines the next one or can claim, I have a bigger portion in the Mishkan. We're all in this together.
Yeah, fair enough. So what else we have in this Torah portion? So we know that one of the and just let's call it by what it is. So we are talking about how we are bringing our resources and how we can bring our resources to create something communal and beautiful. And on the other hand, we will talk in this Torah portion about how we sometimes misuse our resources and we miss the line, because this is the Torah portion of the golden calf. So we will see direction, lack of direction, and eventually in this Torah portion, rectification. And it is not a coincidence that some of the motifs that we use in the liturgy of Yom Kippurim appears in this Torah portion, because the story of this Torah portion, to some extent, is a story about having the right idea, going in the wrong direction, having a quite of a dramatic process of teshuvah in which God and Moses will play some interesting, I would say, role-playing or conversation that will showcase or model how one is supposed to become reflective and accountable, going back to this idea of counting, accountable of our own acts, and ultimately creating a model for forgiveness and continuity.
So first let's deal with the golden calf, and then get to the whole forgiveness and the peace between God and Moses, and the 13 attributes.
Let's take the cow by the horns.
Oh, because I've just been thinking a bit about, how Moses is at the top of Sinai, the people, he's been taking some time there, and the people start getting fearful, and they turn to Aaron, his brother, and they say, make us a god. And he, without even saying anything more to them, yes, we have some wonderful midrashim that they initially killed the first person who they had asked to build the golden calf, and Aaron was afraid that they would kill him as well, so he gave in. But in the Torah text, on the pshat level, it's pretty quick turnaround. How Aaron starts to collect all the golden earrings and all the jewelry, and out comes this egel masecha, this golden, this molten calf, and proclaims it as the God, that this is the God that freed you out of Egypt, and the people begin to dance around it. But I guess I want to get into the psychology of fear itself, of how the people leapt into that pool of fear so quickly, because I see that there's a lot of similarities with how we're living with life today in the face of the pandemic. I have long felt that we've had a second pandemic. It's not just of COVID-19 and all of its variants, but I feel like there's been a pandemic of fear that has really shut people down and shut people away, which has cut off a lot of human contact, which used to be fairly natural, where you have to still keep some distance, even if you're both vaccinated, even the barriers of the mask itself. And, we're talking about transitioning from pandemic to endemic, how to recover our humanity in a time where COVID's still going to be part of our lives. So how fear itself can be so insipid and can sometimes lead to some destructive decisions and consequences is something that's been on my mind.
It's a problem. For Orthodox Jews, like in our community, we do not have the option, for example, on Shabbat of streaming, because our understanding of halakha, of Jewish law, is that to recite Kaddish or other aspects of the minyan experience, you need at least a minyan in a room physically together, not merely on Zoom squares, like the Brady Bunch. Consequently, there's a high percentage of Orthodox congregations that somehow manage to meet, but typically outdoors, still with very controlled, smaller numbers. And there's no question, the interplay of people, and even when you experience people in that minyan, looking at people is just no avoiding looking at people as potential carriers of certain germs. It's a different way of looking at people. When you'd sit at a Starbucks, historically, you're getting together with people. You're just enjoying people with whom you're sitting. The very act of social distancing, masking, if you're into masking, not into masking, it creates a very unspoken psychological sense that people are carrying germs. And it redefines an important aspect of our humanity. And we're all looking forward to getting back into the real world soon, when we go endemic, God willing, with enough of a herd immunity that we stop looking at people that way. But it's a tough time.
It's such a powerful distinction, right? Understanding that we are facing a risk as a society, and on the other hand saying, no, you are dangerous to me. You are a carrier of germs. Then it becomes a completely different conversation. And I got stuck with what Rabbi Mears said about the velocity, the speed of fear and anxiety. And when we act so quickly that we don't even think about what we are doing, and how that somehow is now being under the important Jewish title of Pikuach Nefesh, right? We are prioritizing life, and for the sake of prioritizing life, we will justify all our fears and misbehaviors and anxiety. But with anxiety, you build the golden calf. For this, so look at the contradiction, right? You are with this anxiety building a golden calf and justifying that as Pikuach Nefesh, and say, no, this is what is keeping us alive. And I think that it's time to start challenging our fears carefully, and cautiously, but challenging those fears and honoring what we really want to create in our society, and using our resources to come together around things that are meaningful and important, as opposed to build fake structures that don't lead to any promised land. Quite the opposite, as of course.
I've seen like a real irrational response to the virus. I mean, there's some that for very good reasons, take extra precautions, and as they should, given their own health situation, the health situation of others. And there are others that I see that are not in that category and have really isolated and shut themselves away from a lot of interactions at a great emotional toll to themselves. My big critique, on the far right is those who've spread, vaccine misinformation, and those terrible messages that have come through social media that reinforce those who are more afraid of the vaccine than of the disease itself, with lethal consequences. And on the far left, where they reduce all decisions to COVID, to contracting COVID or not contracting COVID. And they neglect a whole sense of shleimut, of what it means to be a human being. The need of seeing people in person, having normal social interactions with each other, And then what does it mean? You know, it's not good for all of us to be always sitting in front of our screens. And maybe that's a blessing, Rabbi Fisher, for your community, that you can't stream on Shabbat, because then you guys can come together outside or whatever and get off your keisters and move a bit. Because we have other pandemics of mental health, physical health, rising obesity in our country, and diabetes. There's a lot of components to it. So I have throughout, and even more so now, I feel like you have to take it into account with a bit of a rational viewpoint, but refuse to reduce everything to the possible risk of contracting COVID.
Very interesting. I don't know, are you familiar with the writings of Jonathan Haidt?
Yes.
That's so.
So Jonathan Haidt's professor, I think when he wrote The Righteous Mind, he was at Yale, but I think now he's in NYU. He wrote a book called The Righteous Mind. And he makes a distinction between the minds of liberals and conservatives. And, you know, as Rabbi Nancy was speaking, I was thinking about the fact that, you know, we have politicized the pandemic. That's another golden calf. That's another expression of our lost direction as a community, as a people, as a society, and of course there are different individuals or different groups with different tendencies. There are groups that have the tendency to doubt more and not to adopt new technologies quickly, and there are groups that have a tendency to be more careful or more hesitant for certain decision making. I think that we have converted our political views, we have transformed our political views into religious views, and to some extent we see lots of political/religious fanatism, and it has an expression also in how we approach the pandemic and in the exacerbation of fear that, once again, the exacerbation of fear leads to the building of structures that are not conducive for our society. Okay, what else we have in this Torah portion?
I really like the exchanges between Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher, and God, Kadosh Baruch Hu, Holy One, blessed is He, in Mount Sinai, where there's this discussion as Moshe is praying to God to forgive the Jewish people the sin of the golden calf. An exchange suddenly starts where Moshe asks God, would you let me see your face? And God says, no human being can see my face and live. Moshe and God, there's some back and forth on this metaphor. And what finally emerges is that Hashem says, I'm going to pass you by. I'm going to make all my goodness, my glory, pass by you while you stay in this kind of cleft in the rock formation of the mountain. I'm going to put my hand over your face so that you don't see my face, because no human can see my face and live. And then you will see the back of my head. I'll let you see that as I pass by. And I've taught many times, like there's this thing where people talk about my favorite portion or my favorite verse in the Bible. My late wife.
Isn't that supposed to be your bar mitzvah or bar mitzvah portion?
This one is not, as it happens, mine is Chai Sarah, but this is my favorite. It's like I live in Los Angeles in Orange County, and the Dodgers and Angels are supposed to be my team, but I'm a Yankees and Mets fan. Anyway, so in the same way, I teach that, how do we understand this? That you can see the back of God's head, but not his face. And the way I see it, and I was mentioning also my wife, my late wife, Ellen, her favorite part of the Torah is when Abraham, and his son Isaac, Yitzchak, are walking to Mount Moriah, and Yitzchak is saying, where's the animal that's going to be offered for slaughter? And And Abraham says, God will show us the ram, that there's always a ram that God manages to show us, that shows up that last minute and that saves the day. But this is my favorite portion here. And I teach that, there are things that happen in our lives. And at the moments they're happening, we can't make heads or tails of them. It's like we're looking at God's face. When do I look at a face? When do I see your face? When I'm up close, when we're right near each other. When do I see the back of your head? When you're walking away, when you're farther and farther and farther away. The farther away from me you go, the more and more I see the back of your head. And it's like you cannot see God's face in the sense that when God's close, when something's happening at the time, and we're face to face with that moment of God, very often we can't make heads or tails of what's going on. Why is this happening to me? Why is this happening around us? And then years later, looking back at the back of the head, suddenly then we kind of begin to have a sense, not always, but sometimes, that's what it was about. That's what God was doing. Now
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's it.
Now, is it sort of like Jacob, on that way fleeing from Esau's wrath and waking up and God was in this place and I didn't know it? Like it's like something is right there, but you can't perceive it because of all the things that are going on in our life, all the suffering that obscures. But God's presence is actually there, and maybe only with some perspective can we have that sense that yes, God was with me all along.
I love the idea of perspective in this case. And as you were speaking, Rafael Fisher, I was thinking about Shira Shirim, Areni et Marai, etc. It's like, show me your face. Let me see you from the closeness of this relationship that we hear is a recurring motif in the Song of the Songs. But the reality is that it's very difficult to love and to know without some perspective. Like if you try to get to know God by zooming in all the time, or in this case by seeing the face of the divine presence, I don't know if you will see anything. And I think that actually God's presence is way more clear in perspective, the perspective of recognizing nature, in the perspective of recognizing fellow human beings, and the perspective of recognizing history and our own stories, in the perspective of looking back in our lives, or looking within our hearts. But I wanted to ask you, to the two of you, why do you think Moses is asking for that kind of connection at this moment? Why is Moshe telling God, I need you to show me now?
He needs reassurance. I mean, he's been through a lot. I mean, coming down from the mountain, smashing the tablets, putting down a rebellion, going back up there, getting the new set of laws. He spent a lot of energy convincing God not to wipe out our people. Reminding God of the promise God made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to give us this land. And he just needs a moment just to rebuild himself. He's been advocating on behalf of our people, but now this is a moment for Moses.
And as rabbis, we have this kind of unique sort of thing where laity, members of our shuls, come to us and ask us why. Why do these things happen? The classic question is, why do good things happen to bad people, bad things happen to good people? Well, but what's the deeper plan? And is there a deeper plan? And really, to some degree, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God is saying, I cannot make my ways known to you. I'd love to, but you just won't be able to grasp them. So all I can tell you is that I grant grace to those to whom I grant grace. I show mercy to those to whom I show mercy. I cannot make understandable to you as a human being why and how and all the calculations that exist, not only based on today, but when I'm doing something today, it will have ramifications 100 years from now. Just briefly, this idea of the story of Joseph. And when Joseph's brothers look at him at the end after they buried Jacob, Yaakov, their father, and now they're afraid that Joseph is going to take revenge on them. Now the dad is gone, so he won't any longer have to see what's really going to maybe cook between me and the brothers. And Joseph says, don't worry about the fact that you sold me into slavery, because it turned out retrospectively, looking at the back of God's head, time later, years later, it was for the best. There was a famine, and we would have all starved to death. And because of what you did, I ended up placed in Egypt in the right place, so that at the right time, I'd be able to provide food for everybody, be the mashper. And Rabbi Avigdor Miller brings out the thought that what even Yosef did not realize, because he was living it in this sense at God's face, is that, hey, it's even more than you being positioned to provide food. Your presence in Egypt laid the foundational framework to bring the Jews from Canaan, into Egypt, which in turn created a nation in Goshen, which laid the foundation for us to go to Mount Sinai and receive the Torah. And all of that would never have happened had we not relocated from Canaan to our own place in Goshen in Egypt. So things unfold, and we don't even have a way of knowing the longer term ramifications of the things we're doing, like even getting together today.
And maybe a different perspective to that same idea is that while the ramifications are unknown, and for some of us, they might belong to a divine master plan, for some of us, they might not. For me, they don't. What we do know is that we have the ability to decide how we are going to deal with our life circumstances. And I think that just going back to your idea, Rafael Fisher, and this conversation that's happening between God and Moshe, in which Moshe is asking for affirmation, there's a broken trust there. It's not only that the tablets are going to be broken. Moses is broken, and he feels that his trust with God is, to some extent, in my opinion, broken. He's asking for healing. He's asking for healing in his relationship with God. And in this portion, Moses will go from here to there and advocate for the children of Israel and remind God of the covenant that we do every time that we do Tfilat Amidah. And I think that God and Moshe, if there is a master plan here, they're showcasing us how to enter Teshuvah, how we are all capable of anger, but also we are all capable of kindness and forgiveness. And we end up with the 39 attributes of mercy, right? We end up with this idea that Adonai El Rahum Bechanum, that is a forgiving and merciful God. And it's a reminder that we can be forgiving and merciful, and that we can recognize that we sometimes build, even with good intentions, we build out of anxiety, and that we have the opportunity to rectify our ways, to build better structures that those that we have built, and to ask for forgiveness, and at our time also to forgive even when we are not asked. Shall we say good Shabbos?
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.